Fab. Fabulous. Okay, so we'll just give a couple of minutes for people to come into the session, get yourselves comfortable for Emily's presentation. And I'll do an intro in a couple of minutes, guys. So we'll just give a couple of minutes for people to get settled.
How did the first session go?
Yeah, it went well. Yeah, nice yin yoga session.
Nice.
Everyone seems to be nicely zened.
Yeah, and, I'd like to do the gong bath, but I've got clients at 5 o'clock.
Yes, it'll be recorded again.
Okay.
So you can do that. I think it will be recorded. We might have to check, because I know for the digital. Remember, they did the digital summit as well. We did the gong bath, didn't we? So we might have to check on that. Just give another minute, guys, for everyone to get comfy and get settled. Everyone come in, and then we'll kick off. Fabulous. It's still quite warm today, isn't it?
I know, it's really warm.
Muggy. It's muggy today. It's a fine word, especially if you're governor. Muggy. Here we go, 11:02. So, welcome everybody. Welcome to our second session of the Wellness Revival Festival today. I'm delighted that we're joined by Emily today and this morning for her Eating for Great Mental Health session. Me and Emily know each other very, very well, as we are literally family. We are family.
We are.
Yeah. So, Emily is a registered nutritionist. Her company is called Vital Health Nutrition. There isn't much that Emily doesn't know about great nutrition, and she's a fabulous cook as well, to top it off. So there's been many a family occasion where Emily's put on some great delights and stuff for us, and it's always been really nutritious and healthy and good and tasty as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Emily. You're going to pick up some really, really insightful tips and information from this session with Emily. So make notes. We'll do a Q&A session at the end, because I'm sure there'll be lots of questions from you guys that are watching. Without further ado, Emily, over to you.
Thank you very much, Helen. So thanks everybody for signing up for this session. This is turning out to be our most popular webinar. Obviously, mental health is top of most people's agenda at the moment because of the pandemic, the fact that we're stuck at home, most of us, and most people's lives are a little uncertain at the moment. So I'm part of Vital Health Nutrition, and we are a team of nutritionists. And before COVID, we used to go into businesses and run seminars, workshops. We did health testing, all kinds of things around people's wellness calendars. And then since March, we've pivoted to webinars. So this, as I said, has been our most popular request. This presentation is really just to give you some nutrition tips about how to improve your mental health. And in terms of questions, if you could put them in the chat, and there's a Q&A at the end, and I'll answer them all then. So thank you for listening. So what is mental wellness? There is an actual definition. It's a state of well-being in which the individual realises his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So I think what we can glean from that is it's about being productive and feeling good about what you're doing. But there's lots of factors that can affect our mental wellness. when I'm not going to cover all of these today because they don't kind of overlap with nutrition, but I am going to focus on gut health, obviously nutrition, sleep and stress. So this is what I'm going to cover. So what is stress and how we can support ourselves if we are stressed. Foods to support the brain and adrenal function. So the adrenal glands are tiny little glands on the top of your kidneys that produce our stress hormones, and we need to keep them healthy and functioning well, and we achieve that through nutrition. And then you may have noticed over the last few years people are becoming much more interested in the link between the gut and our mental health, and there's more and more research suggesting that the gut is communicating with the brain and vice versa. So what is stress? Stress is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. And stresses can be external, so think kind of pressures that are put upon us from the environment, from work, from situations like family, financial situations, but they can also be internal. So when we're ill, the body is in a state of stress, or having an operation can create stress for the body. But it's really important to acknowledge that it's not an illness, it's a state. But the issue with stress is if it becomes prolonged or excessive, the body starts to respond to that and it can lead to illness. And I'm going to go into that a bit more. So it's really important, I think, to acknowledge where you are on this stress curve. And it's quite a useful way of visualizing stress. So the green section, you know, if you're too laid back, it can be difficult to be productive if there's too little stress or kind of motivation in your life. The optimal area to be is this yellow section, but you can see that's just kind of a tiny part of the whole stress curve. So our jobs really are to try and keep ourselves in that yellow section. And as soon as stress becomes too great, we start to feel tired, and then we can slip into the kind of dark orange section where we're starting to feel tired, and it's a struggle to keep up and keep positive and keep on top of our lives. And then if that goes on for too long, we will slip into burnout. So obviously we want to stay on the left-hand side of this curve, and avoid getting into the right-hand side and creating illness. So what can we do? Well, here, before we start what we can do, let's think about some signs of that you might be stressed. So difficulty relaxing or switching off your mind. As you'll see later in the presentation, you know, stress can really affect our sleep, feeling irritable, getting impatient with others. A lot of people suffer with headaches, and that could be due to tension. So a lot of us carry stress in our necks, and that could cause headaches eventually. Some people really suffer with digestive problems, and the digestive system is very sensitive to stress. So a lot of people will experience more digestive problems. Weight gain is associated with stress. So some people think about people who are anxious losing weight because they stop thinking about food. But if your stress is long term, it disrupts your hormones, and then your body gets into a state where it's telling the body to store fat. And then a lack of interest in sex. And again, this is because all of our hormones are made from the same building blocks. So if you're really stressed and producing a lot of stress hormones, there's not a lot left to produce sex hormones. And kind of grouped in with that would be fertility problems. So I work with a lot of fertility clients, and often when we see a change in their stress levels, then it's much easier for them to conceive. What happens to your body when you're stressed? So typically, and kind of, I guess, the way we've been made evolutionarily, if that's the word, stress is a response that the body creates in order to escape an attacker. So when we were in the Stone Age, that would have been a fantastic physical response to something that was going to attack us. But unfortunately, our bodies haven't evolved that quickly. So we're still creating the same response as we would have done if we were facing an attacker. But often the stress we're experiencing doesn't require energy to run away. There's two hormones involved in the stress response, adrenaline and cortisol. And adrenaline is the first hormone that's released by the body when we're stressed, when we're experiencing a stressful situation. And then cortisol comes behind to kind of support adrenaline and to sustain the stress response. And all of these things happen to your body when you're stressed. But if you think about them, a lot of them are to do with running away from an attacker. So your pupils dilate, and that's so that you can see better to run away from your attacker. You start to take on more oxygen through deeper, quicker breathing. And this is, once you've got the oxygen in your system, then the oxygen will get to the cells, and the cells will be able to make energy, which will enable you to run away. Blood vessels increase again to kind of transport that oxygen and blood around the body so that we can flight, as it will run away. Then one of the things that happens that starts to cause problems for people is all the non-essential functions of the body. The blood is removed from those because we don't need to digest the last meal we've eaten if our life is under threat. So the blood system is taken away, or the blood is taken away from the digestive system and is probably diverted towards the muscles so that we can use that to run away. Other things that happen are that your blood pressure increases. Again, the blood is pumping harder to get around the body to get to those muscles to help you run away. But if you start to think about this, your body being in this kind of state, in a long-term situation, you can see that that could start to lead to problems. The other thing that stress does is it finds, or the hormones do, they tell the body to release stores of glucose into the body for immediate energy. So when you're stressed, you'll have a blood sugar high. So your blood sugars will be high to provide that energy. But again, that's not that useful if you're sitting behind a computer screen. So as I said, there's the issue with stress in the long term is that the hormones create this elevation the stress creates this elevation of stress hormones, and they cause all these things to happen in the body, and this is what leads to ill health. So increased fat storage, increased blood pressure, protein breakdown, so you start to lose muscle, demineralization of bones, so your bones become weaker, the immune system's suppressed. It can lead to things like memory loss, depression, and then you've got this issue of elevated blood sugar levels, which of course could lead to something like type 2 diabetes. So obviously everybody's different, but for some people, if they're anxious, that can lead to a loss of appetite. But for people who are kind of long-term stressed, it's more likely to lead to binging on unhealthy foods or overeating, because you're trying to cope with those surges in blood sugars, which are always followed by a crash. And the other thing that we tend to do when we're stressed is we reach for stimulants. So anything containing caffeine or nicotine, sugar, energy drinks. And that's, again, to help us cope with these blood sugar spikes. So every time you have a stressful event, the blood sugars spike and then they crash, and then you're left craving anything to get you back up again. And if we're consuming too many stimulants, this is how we start to feel. So we start to feel jumpy and irritable, tired, our cravings increase. We find it really difficult to sustain good energy levels. And it contributes to the stress that we're feeling and this kind of disruption of hormones. So even though it's kind of an instinctive response, it's not helping. So what can we do to reduce the impact of stress? The most important thing we can do, and the thing that we have total control over, is balancing your blood sugar levels. And this is where nutrition comes in. So if your life is stressful, the first thing you should be doing is thinking about how you're eating and when you're eating. Because if you're eating erratically or you're eating the wrong foods, the body experiences that as stress, and it kind of perpetuates this stress response. So on this little diagram here, the black wiggly line is showing blood sugar levels. So if you wake up in the morning and you had two slices of white toast with some jam on it, and you wash that down with a cup of coffee, that would cause a surge in your blood sugar levels. When your blood sugar levels peak, the pancreas detects that and it responds, and it thinks there's a huge amount of sugar gone into the body. I need to deal with that. So it produces insulin. Insulin tells the body to remove the sugar from the bloodstream and get it into the cells to make energy. But because the pancreas has over-responded because of your surge of blood sugar, your blood sugars come crashing down. And mid-morning, this is when you're desperate for a cup of coffee. And I guess this applies more in an office environment. If someone's left a packet of biscuits lying around, they're suddenly irresistible. So again, you've got the caffeine and the sugar and white flour from the biscuits, your blood sugars spike, and then they crash again. And then it's lunchtime and you had great intentions of choosing a salad, but you're ravenous. So you choose a massive baguette or a bowl of pasta. And then again, the carbohydrates release that energy very quickly. Another spike, another crash. You're in a meeting mid-afternoon and you can't keep your eyes open. So you're fueling yourself with chocolate bars or more cups of coffee. Again, another spike and a crash. So most people live their lives on this roller coaster. And when we're doing that, we're keeping our blood sugars high, and that will damage our arteries. We're also putting a lot of pressure on the pancreas, and that could lead to conditions like type 2 diabetes. But every time we have that spike, we're producing or releasing extra sugar, and the body, if it's not used up as energy, will store that as fat. So these pink circles are also fat storing episodes. And then when we're having a low, that's when our lives are ruled by cravings, and it's also when we overreact to stress. So we really want to stop this kind of eating pattern. And ideally what you should be doing is choosing foods that release their energy really slowly and gently, so that your blood sugars, if it worked like this, stick between those two dotted lines. So real slow, gentle release of energy, so that the pancreas doesn't overproduce insulin and you don't have that crash again. And if you don't have the crash, you don't have the cravings for the nicotine, the caffeine, the sugar that creates the next spike. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to talk you through now what you can do to modify your diet to make your blood sugars more balanced and remove that layer of stress from the body. Sorry, I'm going to talk about symptoms of poor blood sugar control. These are signs that you've got poor blood sugar control, and I'm sure they're familiar to lots of us. So for me, it's things like feeling drowsy during the day, that kind of afternoon after lunch slump when it's really hard to get through the day, like you're walking through treacle. The reliance on sugar and caffeine, the cravings for sweet foods. Difficulty concentrating. Some of the responses can be quite physical. So when your blood sugars are low, you might feel a bit shaky. Some people get blurred vision, lightheaded feeling. So really all of these are symptoms that your body's not coping with the blood sugar highs and lows. So now I'll talk to you about what we can do. So we call these the 6 golden rules, and they are very straightforward. It's not rocket science, but for most people, it's about tweaking some of their habits around food. So the first thing is timing. It's really important to make sure you don't leave massive gaps without eating, because as you can imagine, if you leave 5-6 hours without eating, your blood sugars are going to be on the floor. And that's when you start craving, that's when you're going to overreact to stress. So it's really important to eat regularly. So don't skip meals, especially breakfast. Otherwise, you're living on adrenaline until you do fuel your body. I'm going to go through these in a bit more detail. The second rule is eat protein with every meal, switch to complex carbohydrates and whole foods, cut down on refined and sugary foods, cut down on caffeine, and then eat more essential fats. So having protein with every meal slows down the release of energy from that meal. And that's what we want to do. We want whatever we eat to release its energy in a really slow and gentle way, so that we don't have a blood sugar high, which is followed by a crash. And one way to achieve that is to have protein every time you eat, whether it's a meal or a snack. And because it's a complex molecule, it takes the body a long time to break it down, and then it slows down the release of the whole meal. So there are obviously lots of sources of protein. So there's the animal-based ones, so meat, fish, dairy, eggs. And then a lot of people overlook the vegetable sources of protein, but they're so good for you. So nuts and seeds, beans, pulses, soya products, so chickpeas, kidney beans, white beans, soya beans, all of these products are great as a protein source, and they will slow down the release of the energy from the meal. Also, they have other amazing properties as well, so they're full of minerals, good fats, vitamins. The next rule, so rule number 3, is to eat whole foods. So it's about switching from white pasta to wholemeal pasta, from white rice to wholemeal rice. And when products are in their natural state, in their whole form, they are naturally slow releasing. So the fibre slows down the release of the energy. They'll contain more minerals that can help the body cope with blood sugar highs, in particular something called chromium that's found in whole foods, but when foods are processed, so when brown rice turns into white rice, it's stripped of 70% of its fibre and most of its mineral content. But things like chromium help the body process sugar and glucose better. So think about whole foods. And vegetables are whole foods. So the more vegetables you have in your diet, the slower the release of energy from the meal, and the better your blood sugars will be balanced. And it's about cutting down on sugar and simple carbohydrates. And really one of the things to understand is your brain only functions on glucose. It doesn't use any other source of fuel. So when your blood sugars are low, it will be driving you to seek out something that gives it the fastest, quickest source of sugar. And ideally, if it's combined with caffeine, it will get that even quicker. So just be aware that that's what's driving your cravings. And then that might give you a better kind of resolve to change your diet so that you don't get to that point where your brain is driving you to seek out sugar. And I've mentioned caffeine a couple of times. So when we drink a cup of coffee, our body has a stress response. So the caffeine creates a stress response in the body. So it's raising your blood sugar levels all on its own, even without any food. So it's really important to really analyse how much you're reliant on stimulants. So that would be tea, coffee, any kind of soft drink containing caffeine, energy drinks, and then obviously things like nicotine. But the thing about caffeine is it is addictive, and you don't need to go through cold turkey. My advice is always to cut it down really, really slowly. So say you're having 5 cups of tea a day at the moment, your goal should be by this time next week to be on 4 cups, and then take another week to get down to 3 cups a day. But the less caffeine you have, the better you'll be able to control your stress response. So try things like herbal tea, try naturally decaffeinated tea and coffee, and obviously drink more water. Every cell in the body relies on water, but if you could kind of balance out your caffeine intake with your water, that would be good. So rule number 6 is eat more fats, but I'm going to incorporate that into the next section on nutrition for the brain and adrenal support. So 60% of our brain is fat. And if our diet is low in fat, this could cause mental health problems. So it can cause depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorder, fatigue, poor memory, dementia. So it's really important to really understand how much fat is in your diet and ask yourself whether it's enough. We're quite fat phobic still as a society, even though there's so much information now to say that fat is important for our health. So whenever you meet people that are on a low fat diet, they're often feeling quite low. And that's because their brain just doesn't have the building blocks it needs to function well. So the brain is made up of thousands of neurons, And if you look at this diagram, this myelin sheath, the kind of snake-like thing, is so that's covered in this myelin. The axon is covered in the myelin sheath, and that is made up of fat. And this is where the signals are transmitted between the brains. So it's really important that we're fueling our bodies and therefore our brains with good fats to keep the brain healthy. And the fats I'm talking about in terms of good fats are omega-3 and omega-6. So omega-3 is found in oily fish. It's also found in some vegetable sources, so flaxseed, pumpkin seed, and walnuts. In fact, and chia seed, which isn't on there. But the best source is oily fish. If you don't eat fish, I would suggest taking an omega-3 supplement, and ideally from fish, but you can also get vegan omega-3 supplements now that are made from the algae that the fish feeds on. But they're really important for your brain health. So omega-3 fats decrease inflammation, and one of the causes of depression is inflammation. So it's really important to make sure that your diet is as full of fat as possible, full of good fat as possible. Omega-6 is another essential fat. This is plant-based, so you find it in sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, evening primrose, and some small amounts in meat and dairy produce, especially if those animals are fed on a grass-fed diet, or a seed. In the case of hens, if they feed on seeds, then their omega-6 content will be higher. But again, another component of the myelin sheath, it's linked to schizophrenia. It's very good. Omega-6 is very good for hormone balance, but it's really important to have a good balance between 3 and 6. Most people need more 3 than they do 6. So it's important to think about your whole diet, and you can get supplements that are a combination, but when you buy a combined supplement, the 3 should always be higher than the 6. And then there's another group of good fats that are often overlooked called phospholipids, and these help the body make neurotransmitters, they enhance mood, and they protect against age-related memory decline. And they're found in eggs, sardines, liver, soybeans, peanuts, and other nuts. And there are some fats to avoid. So there's a whole group of fats called trans fats or hydrogenated fats, and these are fats that have been chemically manipulated, and they're used by food manufacturers to prolong the shelf life of things like cakes and biscuits and ready meals. So we wouldn't add them ourselves to foods, but if you're somebody that eats a lot of processed food, I would be careful that you're not having a high trans fat intake. The other fats that are dangerous for the body are burnt, rancid, or oxidized fats. So if you're regularly eating burnt food or burnt fat on food, so I'm thinking about burnt sausages or cheese that's been grilled for too long, you're introducing oxidation into your body, and that can cause inflammation. So really important not to overdo barbecues. And then highly processed vegetable oil. So, be really wary of using a really cheap vegetable oil. Good cooking oils will come in dark bottles, and we really shouldn't be frying on the hob with polyunsaturated fats. We should be using saturated fats. I want to talk a little bit about neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are the signals that the brain sends, and they are really impactful on our moods. And you're probably aware of a number of them. So dopamine is the neurotransmitter that the body produces in response to reward or pleasure. And it's really tricky with sugar, because sugar creates a dopamine hit, and that's why it's so addictive. So every time we consume some sugar, the brain will release dopamine and will feel great, probably quite momentarily. But it can be hard to get out of that dopamine cycle where we're using sugar to feel great. So if you feel that that's a situation that you're in, it's about finding some other ways of making yourself feel good that replace that hit that you get with sugar, but it's a very hard cycle to break. Another thing you can do though is to eat foods that are high in tyrosine. So the body makes dopamine from tyrosine. So things like chicken and turkey, apricots, cranberries, kiwis, soya, cheese and eggs are all really good sources of tyrosine. So if you could have more of those in your diet, your body would find it easier to make dopamine. The other neurotransmitter that you're probably familiar with is serotonin. Serotonin is our happy hormone. It's associated with feeling good, feeling happy. It's kind of associated with dreams and a good flow of thoughts. So people that are low in serotonin are less likely to dream, and they'll find it harder to have a good flow of ideas and thoughts. So ways of increasing your levels of serotonin are to eat foods that are high in tryptophan. So tryptophan is converted by the body into serotonin. So soy is a fantastic source, eggs, seaweed, seafood, oats, bananas, turkey, nuts, seeds. So all of these foods will give you a better level of tryptophan in the body, which the body can then convert into serotonin. But it needs to have some carbohydrate with it to cross the blood-brain barrier. So some of those are already sources of carbohydrates, so you could eat those on their own. But I'm thinking if you were to have eggs, it would be good to have maybe some oatcakes with them, or a slice of sourdough toast. Then it's more likely that the tryptophan will get into the brain. Yes, and another thing to say is serotonin is depleted by alcohol. So this is one of the reasons that people feel so low the day after having a big night out, is that their levels of serotonin have been depleted. So another thing to think about if you're worried about your mood. And then vitamin D. So vitamin D we make from the sun. We can probably still make it now, so we can only make it in the UK between May and September from the sun because of where the angles of the sun hit the earth. Far too technical for me, but it's a fact. So between September and May, it's a good idea if you suffer with low mood or stress or anxiety to be taking a vitamin D supplement through the winter and spring. There are tiny, 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 tiny amounts in some foods, but not enough to keep your levels high. We really need to, as we would have done in the distant past, make all our vitamin D in the summer whilst we're out working in the fields, and that should keep us going through to the following May. But it's something that your GP can test for free. So I would advise everybody should know what their vitamin D levels are, and we should all be working at getting them to a good level because it's implicated in so many areas of health, not just mood. Another group of foods that's so important for the brain are antioxidants and polyphenols. So these are micronutrients that are found in brightly coloured fruit and vegetables. And because our brain is 60% fat, fat is really susceptible to oxidation. So oxidation is kind of damage from things like free radicals. But what we need our diet to be really high in is these antioxidants and polyphenols to protect the fats in our brain and to slow down that oxidation. So your diet should be a rainbow. Every time you eat, there should be a rainbow of colour on your plate to ensure that you're getting a full range of these amazing phytonutrients. I mentioned at the beginning the adrenal glands. So these are these tiny little glands that sit on top of our kidneys, and that's where they are responsible for producing our stress hormones. And if we've been under prolonged stress for a long time, the adrenal glands can start to shrivel. So we need to make sure that our diets are as nutrient dense as possible to keep those adrenal glands healthy so that they can work efficiently. So B vitamins are really important, and we use those up when we're stressed. So zinc and B vitamins in particular, when we're stressed, we use up a huge amount of them. We use up twice as many than we would if we were in a calm state. So B vitamins are found in most foods. There's a huge range of foods, but mushrooms are a good source, but all whole foods, all fruit and vegetables will contain some B vitamins. Vitamin C. So adrenal glands have the highest concentration of vitamin C in the body. So vitamin C, again, is found in brightly coloured fruit and vegetables. So think things like broccoli, peppers, berries like black currants, kiwi fruit are really high, figs are high. So just think about how much vitamin C is getting into your diet, and think about it in terms of, you know, you're nourishing those adrenal glands so that their stress response is more measured. There's a lot of minerals that support adrenal function. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was theanine. So theanine is it creates a relaxing state, and it's found in really good quantities in green tea. And it induces like a meditation-like state in the brain and helps the body calm down in terms of how much stress hormone is being produced. So a really nice idea is to swap your regular tea or coffee for green tea. And I mentioned at the beginning the link between your gut and your mood. So for a very long time, people have known that the gut is absolutely vital for good health. So if you've got any kind of gut issue, it's likely that that's impacting your health. And recently they've discovered that it's impacting mental health. So the bacteria that lives in our gut, there are 10 times more microbes in the gut than there are human cells in the body. It's an absolutely vast microcosm. It's just incredible. And virtually every week, more and more research is coming out linking specific bacteria to health conditions. But one of our goals should be to keep that gut bacteria balanced. So you'll always have some bad bacteria in your gut, but what you want is a situation where the good bacteria dominate and proliferate, and they keep those bad bacteria in check. And they've now found out or discovered that gut bacteria communicate with our brain. So a good gut flora will lead to improvements in memory, depression, and anxiety. And they've discovered that bacteria in the gut are producing neurotransmitters. So historically, everybody thought they were produced in the brain, but a large proportion are being created in the gut. And that's true for serotonin as well. So GABA is a really relaxing neurotransmitter. It's the thing that makes us feel like, at the end of the day, or when we've experienced something pleasurable. And also BDNF is produced in the brain. And this is, it's called Miracle Grow for the brain. So it's being produced in the gut, and then it's being used by the brain to keep the brain healthy. But the way to encourage good gut bacteria is diversity. So the more diverse your diet, the better the makeup of your gut bacteria. So one question to ask yourself is, how many different foods do I eat in a week? And ideally, you should be aiming for around 50 different foods. So every food that you eat would be considered a different one. So if you ate 5 different types of berries in a week, that would be 5. It's quite a challenge to get to 50, but it's a nice exercise to do to find out how diverse your diet is. Other tips for improving your gut health: so keep well hydrated, plenty of vegetables. I mean, I know we talk about 5 a day, but good health is really about 8 to 10 portions a day. And there are some vegetables and fruit that are particularly beneficial for gut flora. So probiotics are the bacteria, and prebiotics are the food that they feed on. So these foods are really high in prebiotics. So onions, garlic, leeks, bananas, apples, asparagus, and cold cooked potatoes. So make sure that your diet has enough of those in it to encourage the proliferation of good bacteria. And the other shortcut to great gut health is fermented foods. So things like kimchi, kombucha, kefir, lots of things beginning with K, sauerkraut, all of these are fermented foods, and when you consume them, you're introducing good bacteria into your gut. So a really nice way of encouraging the proliferation of good bacteria. Yogurt contains good bacteria as well, but even better is kefir, which is fermented yogurt. And you could consider taking a probiotic supplement. There's plenty of those on the market. But, you know, really nice way of keeping both your gut and your brain healthy. Oh, here's a slide of some more fermented foods. So it might be something you're not familiar with, and I would say, you know, buy a small quantity, try them out. Sourdough is fermented, so that's quite an easy way of getting fermented foods into your diet. I'm a big fan of kombucha and kefir and sauerkraut. Yeah, and kimchi is very trendy these days, so quite easy to find. So yes, hopefully I've given you lots of dietary ideas there about supporting your body if it is stressed. So the key thing is keeping your blood sugars balanced, then being aware of the importance of fat in your diet for brain health, and then understanding that connection between your gut and your mental health and supporting the gut. And I guess, you know, stress is inevitable, especially in 2020, but we do have control over what we eat and how we eat. So really important to take advantage of that. And then think about the dietary changes you can make. So these are the ones that I think could be considered. So have more good fats in your diet from oily fish, nuts, seeds, avocados and eggs. Choose unrefined carbohydrates. Reduce the amount of sugar in your diet. Assess your stimulant intake. You know, think about, I think for some people being at home probably means that they're drinking less coffee because there's no coffee machines, there's no Starbucks to walk past, but you might be having more teas and coffees to break up the monotony of your day. So just think about which camp you're in, and whether you need to address that. Have some good quality protein every time you eat to keep that blood sugar stable, and add in some fermented foods to your diet. And then you can look like this man. Yes. Yes, so that's it from me. I think we've got a Q&A session in a moment. And just to say, this is one of, I think, 16 topics that we cover in webinars. So if your business would benefit from webinars to keep your staff motivated, then please do get in contact. And that's it from me.
Fabulous. Fabulous as always, Emily.
Thank you.
Much, yeah, so much information. I think Nicola's just sent a question in. So which fruits would you recommend as the best to snack on? I'll often think I'm being good by eating a piece of fruit, but aware that they can contain a lot of sugar. You've mentioned a few in this presentation, but do you have a top 3? And any that you would eat only as a treat?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. So the first thing I'm going to say is, when you do eat fruit, have it with some protein. So unless you've got a nut allergy, if you were going to have an apple, I would have 5 almonds with it, or a banana, maybe 5 cashew nuts. But don't eat fruit on its own. Always combine it with protein. So that could be yogurt, nuts, seeds, a piece of cheese, and then that will slow down the release of the sugar from that fruit. It's difficult for me to say my top 3 fruits because I have oral allergy syndrome, which means I'm allergic to any fruit with a skin on it. So, but from a nutrition perspective, berries are always at the top of my list because they're very low in sugar, they're high in fiber, they're an amazing source of antioxidants. So always berries is my first, would be my first choice, and I'm not allergic to them, so I eat them every day. Kiwi fruits I am incredibly allergic to, but I do realise that they'd be very beneficial for other people. They're an amazing source of vitamin C, so that would be a good choice. And then, you know, apples are brilliant, absolutely amazing. They also contain something called quercetin, and quercetin is anti-inflammatory. And when we were growing up, there was this, I'm sure people still use it, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Somebody has actually done some research and proved that that is the case. So, you know, if you can eat apples, amazing, a really easily available, portable form of fruit. You don't need to put it in anything to keep it from being squashed. But yeah, apples would be amazing. And the ones I'd keep for a treat would be bananas. So bananas are incredibly nutritious, but they're very high in fast releasing sugar. The fact that you can kind of almost digest them in your mouth is a sign that they're going to release their energy really, really quickly. So bananas, I would say, for children and for people that are doing very physical work, or if you've just done a really long run, it would be good to have banana.
Yeah,
but with a handful of nuts.
So good for an event day if you're rushing around.
Yes, yeah,
is a good fruit to have. Yeah. Quite a few. There's a few questions flying in, so just some quick answers if that's all right for this one. Juicing fruit, do you need to include protein too?
Yes, I would. If you're making a smoothie, chuck in a handful of nuts. That would be a good, or some yogurt.
Yeah, fabulous. What foods can you recommend if you have kidney disease? That's probably quite specific. You probably need to have a private conversation about that.
Yeah, and that is very specific. I wouldn't want to talk about that on this kind of forum.
Yeah, the same for gluten intolerant. Which whole foods would you recommend? That would need to really be on a private, personal.
Well, I mean, that's quite straightforward. So if you're gluten intolerant, gluten is only in a small amount of foods, but unfortunately they're fairly big in terms of how people eat. So so wheat, spelt, barley, rye.
Yeah.
I don't think I've forgotten one. Yes.
Fab. Tina's asked a couple of times, so let's ask this question. Is fresh pineapple good for you?
Of course it's good for you because it's full of fibre and nutrients. It's also amazing because it's full of digestive enzymes. So after a meal, if you're feeling a bit full and you can't digest it, it's a good thing to have it then. But it is high in sugar. So all the tropical fruit I would only have occasionally as a treat. So bananas, pineapples, mangoes.
Perfect. Do you know, there's a lot of questions, guys, so what we'll actually do is we'll collate all these questions in at the end, and maybe if Emily can do a kind of to answer the questions, and we can send them out in an email to everybody that's attended the session afterwards, so you can
that's fine.
Brilliant. But amazing session, Emily, as always. And do check out what Emily was saying about the links between mental health and your gut health as well. There are some that say, well, there's a lot of people that say that the body actually has 3 brains. And that's because you have neurons in your actual brain, you have neurons in your heart, and you have neurons in your gut. So that's the 3 essential neuron activity areas of the body. That's why they say things like trust your gut, listen to your heart, listen to your head, kind of stuff, because there is links between the 2, and there are actually, have a look at that link between mental health and gut health as well. There are lots of links between conditions such as depression. I have bipolar, subbipolar, and schizophrenia, with conditions like Crohn's, IBS, and the links between the 2. And there's a little bit of a debate going on at the moment, like Emily has covered, in terms of which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of stuff. So what came first, the gut health or the mental health problems? So there's a lot of debate and discussion and research being carried out into that. So there are definite links there. Nutrition is one of the 3 pillars of health. It's Event Wellbeing Month this month as well, and we are actually in Nutrition Week, or 7 days of nutrition. So do take a look at that and the information we've got there. Nutrition is just so vital for your mental health and well-being. And Emily has covered that absolutely perfectly for you. So I hope you're all taking lots of notes, but it has been recorded, so you can catch up on this session afterwards. Thank you so much, Emily. Thanks to everyone for joining us. This session has been sponsored by InSync Events. They're a creative event consultancy, and we'd like to introduce you now to Jess Ince, who's going to present with a 2-minute session on the business.
Thank you. Hello, it's great to be here. And thanks so much to Emily too for the very clear and informative talk. I completed a nutrition course and qualified as a holistic health coach myself this year, so it's a subject I'm very passionate about. So InSync have been running for 15 years, and we plan and produce all types of events, source outstanding hospitality offerings, and curate large and small scale experiences for a wide range of clients. We work closely with an extensive black book of niche collaborators and content partners to bring our clients' brand and messages to life through unique concept design, entertainment curation, and team building propositions. Looking at the next slide now, thank you. As awareness around the importance of wellbeing in the workplace has grown, we've really enjoyed working with forward-thinking companies, including Google, YouTube, and Spotify, to produce an eclectic range of team workshops, as well as an inspirational talks programs focusing on mental health. This slide shows the topics we tend to focus on: nutrition, mindfulness, movement, creativity, conscious living, and work-life balance, along with some of our favourite ideas for interactive workshops and experiences, which can be run on or off-site, as well as virtually to connect remote workers at this time. We can produce DIY maker kits and deliver them to homes ahead of online group tutorials, as well as goodie bags for fun after-work social experiences, and also creative mailers as a promotion or thank you to clients. On the next slide are some images from the wellbeing program we curated for Google and 4 of their agency clients. This included a nutrition workshop and cooking demo with rugby player James Haskell, an immersive yoga box class with bespoke cinematic visuals, stop motion animation and terrarium making sessions, as well as a pop-up breath pod with a 20-minute mindfulness and breathwork experience. The next slide shows some of the hugely popular animal therapy classes we've run, puppy parties and puppy yoga, and we've also organised the famous goat yoga classes too. We pride ourselves on being on top of the trends and like to think outside of the box to create inspiring and engaging experiences to get people talking, and which also help you foster a unique culture. We'd love to explore how we can help you achieve your objectives, so please do get in touch to discuss ideas. Our contact details are on the last page, including my direct email and mobile number, if you'd like to move on. Yes, great. Thank you very much.
I'm on mute. Thank you, Jess. Thank you very much for that presentation. Thank you very much for supporting and sponsoring this session for us. Emily, thank you again. Wonderful lady.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Emily, how can people find out more about Vital Health?
So our website is www.vitalhealthnutrition.co.uk. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So yeah, Twitter, all the usual places. Yes, or just give me a call, if you want to discuss your requirements.
Excellent. Lovely. Brilliant. Thank you so much to everyone for attending this session. We hope you're going to join us for our next one, which kicks off in 8 minutes time. We'll be talking about wellbeing in the workplace, nice idea or essential. And we've got a fantastic panel. We've got Chris Pinner from Inner Fit, Claudine Martin, who is a PA, and we've got Laura Capel-Abra from Stress Matters, who are one of EventWell's preferred partners for mental health first aid training. So it's going to be a really, really insightful and educational session. So I hope you can join us for this. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Jess. And we'll see you in about 8 minutes. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.